gained valuable insights into the vision and plans of Movimiento Semilla under Mr. Arévalo's leadership. As part of our series of events titled Guatemala's Choice, we are delighted to also announce today that we will host presidential candidate Sandra Torres tomorrow at 5 p.m. for a similar conversation. So stay tuned to that as well. With that, I look forward to an informative discussion that will shed light on the path ahead for Guatemala and the role that Movimiento Semilla aims to play in shaping a better and prosperous future for the country. Once again, Mr. Arévalo, on behalf of the Atlantic Council, I wish to extend our warmest welcome to you, express our gratitude for your presence today. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jason Marczak, Senior Director of the Adrian Arch Latin America Conversation.
Thank you so much, Maria Fernanda, and welcome again to all of you joining us virtually. I'm very pleased to moderate this conversation with Bernardo Arévalo, Guatemala presidential candidate. With less than a month, just about over 3 weeks until the August 20th runoff election, question is what's going to be happening in Guatemala next, and of course, what's at stake for the country's democracy at this critical moment. To kick it off, Mr. Arévalo, you represent Movimiento Semilla, a party that was founded only 6 years ago, will now be competing in the second round of the Guatemala election against Sandra Torres. What led to your advancing to the second round?
Well, I think that we were always very clear as a party that our stance is anti-corruption. We were born as an anti-corruption party 6 years ago. Because we are clear that development will not come unless you take away corruption from the equation of governance. So we have had a performance in Congress during this tenure that has made evident to everybody that we were very serious and in terms of our positions around issues of corruption, our fight against any way of corruption, our denouncing of all these shady schemes that we have at every level of government. And what happened during this election is that this was an election that actually somehow catalyzed the Guatemalan people to translate this dormant protest against corruption into an active protest against corruption. I think that the fact that the corrupt clique that has co-opted the institutions managed to expel from the first round of elections 3 candidates, very different among them, very different ideologically and personally, but that had one thing in common, that were not amenable to be controlled by this clique, made them realize that actually there was a need to raise to the moment and to vote for the only option that actually presented a very clear, express, and determined position against corruption that was also proven through its performance in Congress, and that is Movimiento Semilla. So I think that what we have seen afterwards in the streets is that there is a rekindling of hope, a rekindling of confidence, and that people are actually believing that we can advance and begin to get rid of this corrupt political system that we have been suffering for decades by now.
Great, thank you so much. I'd like to shift to look ahead to the next few weeks. If you could share with us a little bit your schedule for the next few weeks, but also what will you prioritize leading up to August 20th? And what are your biggest concerns? And we're all in this conversation very aware of the many actions that have been taken in Guatemala recently. So your concerns with regard to the democratic process. I'll also share the U.S. Assistant Secretary for Western Hemisphere, Brian Nichols, shared the other day that he had spoken with the Guatemalan Foreign Minister about, as he shared via his tweet, the importance of Guatemala's second round election proceeding without interference or harassment of candidates and parties. So what are your big concerns looking to August 20th, and what will you be prioritizing?
Our big concerns is that actually we are seeing that the authorities are not relenting in their attempts to persecute us politically. actually we understand that they are intending to scale up. The reason why we were unable to be present with you today in Washington, D.C. is precisely because we were informed of the possibility of some massive, between 12 and 16 arrest warrants that were supposed to be issued against members of our party in an escalation of the political persecution that we are suffering right now. Political persecution that is blatantly illegal, that is completely out of what has been ordered already by the Constitutional Court, of what has been recognized by the Electoral Tribunal, but that nevertheless continues, but that we are determined to confront legally. And we have a legal team that is presenting all the legal measures necessary in order to protect our party. We are confident that we have done nothing wrong, and we just hope real due process takes place, and to concentrate ourselves in actually the campaign. Because what we know that one of the goals of this campaign of attrition, if you wish, is to actually distract us from running the electoral campaign, going out, talking to the people, going into the countryside, and convincing, actually letting people see that there is a possibility, there is a way out of this state of corruption, and that we are the ones that present that hope.
Thank you. Guatemala today is grappling with a number of different challenges, which you mentioned previously in your answer to the what led to your moving on to the second round. One of them being corruption, economic disparities, social insecurity, of course, migration as well. Could you share a broad outline of how do you plan to address these issues, as well as how do you envision engaging different sectors, private sector, civil society, international organizations, United States as a country writ large as well, to affect meaningful challenge in these different areas?
Yeah, I think that there are basically three goals that we need to do. We have to rescue institutions so that institutions can begin to work again and deliver their development outcomes. In order to do that, we need to take corruption out of the picture. Once you have working institutions, you can begin to put in place structural or mechanisms for a structural resolution of the historical deficits that we have in development, in health, in education, in nutrition, in everything that the state has not been, governments have not been interested to address, because they have been governments interested actually in pilfering the state. So we believe that in order to do that, we are going to be setting up, and we have a lot of programs working in that direction. But in order to do that, we need to revamp the economy, to reconstitute the economic system. We are going to have a very ambitious program of investment in infrastructure, which is long due roads and schools and health posts in the most abandoned parts of the country, that are going to provide jobs that are very necessary now, while at the same time we provide incentives for entrepreneurs to actually come forward and develop through the type of loans, non-commercial loans, that will enable them to actually flourish, and information and support, so that actually it is through the development of jobs, the enhancement of production, that we believe we're going to get the necessary means to address sustainably the development needs of the country. But in order to do that, we need to, again, regain control of the institutions and root out corruption from the formula.
And how do you plan to engage private sector, civil society, international organizations in these efforts?
Well, I mean that once we have a very clear plan, and we do have a very clear plan for development, all the different actors will find a place and a role. The private sector is a fundamental partner in development. They are the economic agents. We do not intend as a government to become an economic agent, although we are going to provide support and regulation for this sector. International actors are going to find that both in terms of international cooperation, we are going to know where do we need specific assistance through bilateral cooperation or through multilateral programs or through loans, and international private investment is going to be very welcome, as we believe that it is it has to play a very clear role in relaunching the economy. Actually, we see our work in creating the conditions that will enable this international investment to come. Certeza jurídica, which
judicial certainty.
Judicial certainty, I don't know if there's a judicial certainty, knowing that judicial institutions, that there is rule of law, basically. Then investment in the infrastructure that is going to be needed to actually, if you're going to set up a factory or an investment in a place of the country, then you're going to have the roads and the ports and all the infrastructure in order to move in and move out whatever you need for your investment to flourish, and the capital, human capital that is necessary, people that are better educated, people that are better able to be engaged into this productive.
Great, thank you so much. Let me shift the conversation to the United States, talking to you here from Washington, D.C. The United States is a significant trade partner for Guatemala. How do you perceive the U.S.'s role in Guatemala's economic development over prosperity, and what strategies do you have in place or are you contemplating to collaborate with current and future U.S. administrations to mitigate the challenges facing Guatemala?
Well, we do have a very important shared agenda with the United States. One of the issues is fundamentally trade and investment. The United States is our first commercial partner, and it's also our main source of foreign investment. And we are very interested in furthering developing that. We are also have common interests in dealing with issues of migration, which is a phenomenon which brings us together into thinking how to actually, on the one side, generate conditions that prevent people from going out from Guatemala, but also until that is achieved, and we have a country that provides jobs and well-being for everybody so that nobody wants to leave, then how to protect the people that are in transit to the United States, how to arrange for these people actually to be protected in the process of engaging with U.S. authorities and so on and so forth, and issues of security, which is fundamentally, we are partners in the fight against international organized crime of every sort, narco traffic, traffic of persons and so on. So we do see in the United States a critical partner for us and for our national goals of development.
I mentioned previously the comments that have been made by the U.S. State Department with regard to the democratic process in Guatemala currently. From your perspective, what additional are you looking for? Additional statements, additional action? What is your message to the international community in the United States writ large as we look to the August 20th runoff election?
Well, we are very appreciative of the role that the international community in general and the United States in particular have taken around the current crisis. I think that there is a general rejection of these attempts to derail democratic process and electoral process in our country. And we are witnessing how in the Organization of American States and at other levels, there are attempts to actually really make very clear how much the international community condemns any attempt to actually tamper with these processes. I think that the challenge is going to be the moment in which these messages are not going to be sufficient because there is an escalation by this clique that is becoming smaller, but at the same time more desperate and more unpredictable. And at that point in time, we expect that we can have the international community participation in order to address and protect Guatemalans that might be in risk because of the recklessness of these actors.
I want to take a moment and shift the focus to Asia. How do you perceive the evolution of Guatemala's diplomatic relations with Taiwan?
Well, we are already in conversations with the government of Taiwan, and we are already discussing the ways in which we can begin to harness, let me use that word, their cooperation into our development plans. And we have made it very clear that there is no interest in altering the diplomatic relations between our countries.
So you expect the status quo to be maintained?
Well, we have also made, and we have made it publicly, we don't see that being contradictory with the fact that there's already commercial ties established between Guatemala and the People's Republic of China, and that we can begin to explore the expansion of those commercial ties, so that for us, working in both directions, keeping diplomatic relations with Taiwan and exploring commercial relations with China are completely compatible.
We've talked a little. Thank you. We've talked a little bit about your priorities as a candidate, and if you were to be elected on August 20th, many priorities. You have a large list of issues you want to tackle. How would you prioritize the many issues that you have within your campaign? How would you prioritize that, beginning on maybe we'll say day one, but even the first few months of the presidency, if you were to win? What would be some of the top issues that you would begin to focus on if you were to be elected?
Well, I think that there are two very clear issues that need to be addressed to immediately. One is the setting in place and beginning to implement the fight against corruption systemically. Of course, I aim to be heading the executive branch of government, and we know that corruption is also penetrating other branches of government to which we are going to be respectful from a Republican perspective in terms of our constitution. But we are going to be addressing and ensuring that everybody understands, and particularly the population understands, that all our discourse about fighting corruption has not been just a void promise, but actually really something that we believe we need to address. And at the same time, we're going to be very clear in putting in place and letting work a cabinet that is going to be made of people that are not only going to be experts and completely honest, but also very good managers, because what we need is to have short-term results in order to show people, the products of regaining control of the institution, so that we can buy time to actually work on the midterm and longer-term strategies for development that we need to put in place.
Thank you. As well as we look to August 20th, both you and your challenger, Sandra Torres, whoever wins in the second round will have to amass many more votes than in the first round. What are going to be your strategies over the next few weeks to try to gain that larger voting share?
Well, that's why we will not let ourselves be distracted by this judicial war of attrition, this political persecution. We are continuing our political campaign. We are visiting all the departments. Our party had great results in the metropolitan area, in Guatemala City and all the surrounding municipalities, and in other big urban centers like Zacatepeques and in Quetzaltenango. But we need to actually go out and speak to the people in the more rural areas. And that's what we're going to be devoting ourselves to do through all the different ways that we have identified, in person, but also using radio and social media and so forth.
Thank you. the Guatemalan Congress, of course, is vital for moving forward different priorities of the president. Congress is an area where Movimiento Semilla does not, of course, have a majority. What would be your strategy if you were elected to working with Congress?
Well, first of all, we already have identified a range of actors and parties in Congress with which we could cooperate, probably around a very clear common agenda for very specific pieces of legislation that the country needs urgently to move forward. We also know that the incentives to keep these corrupt alliances, which have characterized Congress in the last years, are going to change, because what was the key element that tied together corruption and corrupt businesses was the government's budget. And the government is no longer going to put the budget on the table for all these corrupt businesses to take place. So this is going to change incentives and might actually lead to a rearrangement of forces within Congress. But in any case, we are very aware that we have a minority in Congress, and we have a strategy that if we manage to actually work with a constructive Congress, that is all the best. We can really work for institutionalization and be more ambitious in our policies. But if it's not going to be possible because we don't have that situation, or we even have a Congress that it's intent on actually, not cooperating with the government, we are going to advance as much as we can with what the legal means we have as executive branch to proceed with all our plans, and not to let ourselves be sequestered by a non-working Congress.
Mr. Arévalo, you've discussed the attention from the international community. We've talked about the United States and others with regard to the election and the electoral process. We have about just a few more minutes here. But for those who haven't been following the Guatemala election as closely, of course, the Atlantic Council, we're a global foreign policy institution. Why does what matters in the next few weeks, as well the next presidential term, why is it vital for the international community writ large, the process that we're seeing unfolding in Guatemala and the decision of who becomes its next president?
Well, I'm not exaggerating, and I think that I'm not being partial by saying that actually we have democracy at the crossroads in this election. We have an option between a party that has been adamantly fighting against corruption and for renewal of institutions since its origins, and a party which is fundamentally part of that old political system that has been, encrusted into the state and part of the corruption, of the corrupt clique. The results of this election are going to be critical in that direction. But the first part to that election is really ensuring that there is due democratic process and that the elections are respected, and that no undue interference takes place from other actors in government, which is what we are seeing at this point in time.
And joining us today, of course, are folks from across the United States, international community. With the 2 minutes we have remaining, what is your final message to those who have taken the time to listen to you, to join us virtually as we look ahead to the next few weeks?
Well, we do hope that we will be able as a nation to overcome these critical moments in which we are living. We are witnessing this in the hope that we see in the people, in the determination that we see in the people in the streets. We have come from, a citizen apathy to a citizen belief and activism, and we believe that was the critical component that has been missing from our politics for a long time. we believe that with that is going to be possible to actually really move forward. And we appreciate the consideration and the attention that the international community provides to the next weeks in Guatemala, because events in Guatemala in the next weeks are going to be critical to the possibility of our country to finally re-engage in the direction of democratization and prevent the democratic erosion that we have been witnessing in the last decades.
I want to thank you again, Mr. Arévalo, for taking the time to join us today in the midst of a very important campaign, in the midst of continued uncertainties in Guatemala. Wish you would have been able to join us here in person in Washington, D.C., but hopefully the next time. And I want to again reiterate our expression of the importance of following a fair and free democratic process that allows all candidates to be able to compete over the next few weeks, not only looking to August 20th, but also the period between August 20th and the inauguration in January and beyond. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And I want to thank our audience for tuning in today as well.
Thank you very much, Jason, and thank you very much to the Atlantic Council.
Wonderful. Everyone else, thank you very much.